So when I was 17, I used the internet for the first time. It was 1995, and I'd just started university. And I was blown away. I was so excited, I was so inspired that the idea of equity of access to information, the idea that you could use this technology to break boundaries between cultures, between geographies, between socioeconomic statuses, all of these aspects were so inspiring that I switched degrees from the arts degree I was studying, majoring in philosophy, and I moved into computing and probably changed the course of certainly my career, but I think actually my life. 1995 is also the year that a dude called Michael Porter talks about the break between the first and the second wave of the IT industry. That first wave is, or was focused on, I guess, automation, standardization, optimization, and I think, unfortunately, is responsible for building a whole bunch of stereotypes about how boring IT is. There was actually a lot of interesting work being done, I'm sure, but it doesn't sound that exciting from the outside. So from 1995 onwards, we had the internet, and organizations were able to start thinking about differentiation, starting to think about how do they interact with customers, how do they interact with clients, how do they interact with partners, and actually build an ecosystem to better serve whichever kind of customer they had. But frankly, even though I worked on some pretty interesting projects in that time, I was kind of disappointed for about 15 years. The technology just couldn't live up to what my, maybe somewhat naive 17-year-old imagination had in mind. And while the work we were doing was interesting, and the groups of people we were working with, it wasn't just developers anymore, it was designers, it was interaction architects, it was all of these different kinds of people, technology was still the constraint. What we could imagine was often not possible. But you fast forward to today, and over the last few years, the advances in technology like cloud, like data, like mobility, like automation, Internet of Things, or as our head of things calls it, the internet. These things are starting to feel much more possible. Technology is not the constraint anymore. And interestingly enough, the new constraint is us. There's two aspects to that. One is how we think about technology. People like me that were introduced to the internet at 17, we have all these mental models about how the world works and the role of technology in that world. And it constrains our thinking about how to interact with technology. People that are being born at the moment, they're not going to have this baggage. I can't imagine what my nephews will be doing in 20 years' time when they've grown up in this world that we're creating. But the other constraint, to be able to power this massive peak that's coming up, is the kind of creative talent that's required to drive it. And most of you folks in the room, I'm assuming, are part of that creative talent pool. We are the new scarcity in this space. And that's a little bit about what I'm going to talk about. Pretty sure there was a photo on that slide. I'm not sure my slides were this boring to begin with, but it doesn't really matter because there wasn't a lot more content. I was asked a while ago to speak at an event where I was asked to talk about how the introduction of art and design into technology have made traditional STEM actually creative. And I managed to hide my frustration reasonably well, and I said yes, and I went to the event, and I let them in on the secret that you folks probably already know, which is that science, technology, engineering, mathematics, they've always been creative pursuits. At their core, they're problem-solving activities, and problem-solving requires a level of creativity that is enormous. But I'm not saying that the introduction of new skills and capabilities haven't made us more creative as a whole. They absolutely have. And it's a much more exciting industry to work in with the combination of those skills and abilities. And this is why. So if you think about diversity, there's so many different aspects to it. So when I say diversity, I'm talking about diversity of experience, of skill, of capability, of gender, of sexual orientation, of background, of every possible aspect you can imagine. But while I'm a fan of diversity, I would suggest that not every type of diversity is good. I'm not a particular fan of the kind of diversity that allows us to accept like brilliant, talented, awful people in our teams. And I'm sure that everybody's worked with one of those sort of toxic, brilliant assholes in their time. I think we need to be intolerant of that kind of behavior. And the only regret I've ever had on moving on those sorts of people out of my teams is that I didn't do it earlier. You cannot overestimate. You cannot think about the fact that that toxicity and that impact, it's just far bigger than you expect. So get rid of them. We don't have any space for them. And importantly, when I say I'm not interested in having brilliant assholes on teams, that is completely different to saying I'm not interested in conflict. I think conflict is actually something organizations and maybe individuals shy away from far too much. Positive, constructive conflict, it's kind of what diversity is all about. It's kind of the point. That ability to have discussions and arguments and debates is just one of the great powers that we have. And for anyone that has worked with any of my colleagues at Thoughtworks, you've probably seen this in action. So Thoughtworkers love a good argument, or any argument. And I've seen time and time again at Thoughtworks and with other colleagues and clients, the power of that kind of argument, the power of creative abrasion. There was a guy called, he's probably still a guy, and I think he's still alive. So Jerry Hirschberg wrote a book in about 1995 called The Creative Priority. He was the head of design at Nissan, and he brought together engineers and designers into the same teams to come up with new designs for cars. It's a great book. It's aged well, so go and read it. But he talks about the power of creative abrasion, the power of diversity to drive debate and to build better ideas as a result. So again, huge proponent of diversity, but there are also aspects of sameness that I think are important, of sameness that's important in building an ecosystem and an environment that allows this creative abrasion to flourish. And those are attributes like curiosity, like integrity, like humility, like respect, like intolerance of intolerance. And those are the things that you need to build and look for commonly amongst people with massively diverse skill sets, backgrounds, experience. Creative abrasion also helps us fight against another enemy of innovation or enemy of genius, and that's specialization. And keep in mind, when I say specialization, I don't mean, talk a lot about what I don't mean, I'm sorry. I don't mean the kind of brilliant specialization that comes from a deep interest and a passion and a curiosity about a particular topic that drives the thinking in that topic forward. It's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is the external constructs that are applied on us through the world that we work in and the world that we're educated in. The constructs that tell us that I'm a project manager and she's a developer and you're a designer. It's those constructs of specialization that just apply this baggage to us and start suggesting that it's inappropriate for, I don't know, me to go into your dance space and for you to come into mine. It suggests that crossing over those boundaries is not valuable and shouldn't be done. And it couldn't be further from the truth. Your ability to debate and learn together and build better outcomes for clients, better products, all of those aspects of creativity, your ability to go through those boundaries, understand more about the capabilities and the skills and the attributes of the people working right next to you are incredibly important. So if, just say, you agree with me and you think this kind of diversity is important, how do you find and cultivate those sorts of teams? And I want to talk about three aspects here. One is sourcing, one is selection, and the other is initiating change. So I don't mean this to sound condescending, but I couldn't find another way of saying it. If you look for the same people in the same places that you already have, you'll find the same people from the same places that you already have. Seems really obvious, but I find I have to say it to people quite often. So where do you look instead? If you're looking to find, I don't know, we're Australia, where our economy is inextricably linked to the Asia-Pacific region. If you're looking for a greater level of Asia capability in your workforce, go and find brilliant groups of curious, passionate, interesting people that have that capability. You know, Thai Australians or Singaporeans or Chinese people that are living here. And amongst that group, look for the skills and capabilities that you want. Because you're not necessarily going to find a special interest group of people that have that perfect combination of the skills and experience you're looking for and the diversity you're looking for. For anyone that's trying to hire more women into their technology teams, you'll find that any women in tech community has probably been visited pretty heavily by other people that are trying to do the same thing. So look harder, look in different places. Go and find passionate, interesting, curious women that are doing various interesting things, and then find people with those technology skills within them. Or look for aptitude and possibility and help them grow it. The second part I wanted to talk about was selection. So there is a thread that's been going a bit nuts on LinkedIn where it asks, if you have two equally qualified candidates, how do you select which one to hire? And I somewhat flippantly suggested that if you think two candidates are equally qualified, you're probably not thinking broadly enough about the qualities you're looking for. But just say you do. Instead of comparing them to each other, because actually by suggesting they're equally qualified, you've probably already decided that the skills and capabilities are good enough for what you're looking for. Think about who brings you more of what you don't have. So just say you have a team full of 27-year-olds, which is not unusual in our industry, hire the person in their 50s. If you have a team full of men, hire the person that's not a man. If you have a team full of people that only speak one language, hire the person that speaks three, and from experience, that will make you feel inadequate every day as a person that only speaks one language, but it's really important. So think about who brings you more of what you don't have. And in a piece that everyone seems to be trying to do is, how do you change the makeup of your team? And I want to talk about a couple of things here. There's multiple aspects of diversity that you'll be looking for. Don't try and change them all at once, because that's really hard, and you'll probably fail, and you'll get frustrated, and you'll give up. So limit your work in progress. Pick one or two aspects to start with. At Thoughtworks, we have a global diversity set of targets around gender, but every country also chooses a secondary target that's appropriate for the market that they're in and thinks about how to change on those. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what we've done in Australia. The first piece is, once you've worked out what you want to change, you need to think about what your intent is, and you need to think about what your execution metric is. So when I joined Thoughtworks 10 years ago, we had a very clear intent that we wanted to build brilliant gender-balanced teams. It was very clear. And about 5 years later, we took a good hard look at ourselves, had a look at what the numbers said, and we had not changed whatsoever. We were 21% women in 2011. And we thought, okay, maybe intent by itself is not enough. So we actually introduced quotas, where from a hiring perspective, we had to hire 50% at least that were not men into every role. And 5 years later, we are now 46% women across the board. But importantly, that intent of build a brilliant gender-balanced workforce was the driving force behind that quota. And the reason why I talk about both of them together is that if you just have intent, my experience shows that you don't get a result. If you just have a quota, you'll probably get the wrong result. You have to put those two things together and execute on them together. And I'm saying it like it's easy. It's really, really freaking hard. The other piece is our secondary point of interest that we wanted to look at in Australia was to increase the Indigenous representation in a technology scene. And the first thing we realized is that we had absolutely no idea. Like, we don't know anything about how to do that. So we went looking for friends. And we found this brilliant organisation called Career Trackers. If anyone is interested in this space, go and find out about them. Come and ask me later. They are an Indigenous internship program for us. They help Indigenous students get from the point that they enter university into the workforce, and they have been a source of incredibly brilliant and amazing interns. And we've changed our view from, let's just find some Indigenous people and have them join Thoughtworks, which is a pretty awful and selfish view, to let's create a place that's brilliant and challenging for interns and create a stronger Indigenous talent pool across the country. There are only about 4 Indigenous students studying technology anyway, so we're not exactly going to be able to transform that whole piece. But we have taken amazing interns with backgrounds in medicine and law and other studies and brought them into our company and just learnt an enormous amount from them. So if you're looking to get into that, Career Trackers, again, they are brilliant. So I've talked a bit about why this is important for building great products. I've talked a bit about why this is important for organizations and how you can maybe make a change. So selfishly, why is it important to you? If we think about the fact that we're all, relatively complex humans, and we're created by things that we can't change, like our genetics and things like that, and we're built by the sum of our experiences and our interactions. One of the great ways of learning is to build those experiences, to have a higher variety of experience. But I would suggest that you don't necessarily need to have all of those experiences yourself. Stealing experience from others is a brilliant way to learn. And if that's a great way to learn and accelerate your career, then why wouldn't one surround yourself with the most diverse set of experiences possible? So it's good for building great products. It's good for building great companies. And if you want to think about it selfishly, which is all right, we're allowed to be selfish from time to time, it's brilliant for your own career. And, good, clicking. Finally, look, if people are looking for a business case for this, just go and Google it. You'll find all the stuff that you need to find to convince others. But frankly, I don't really give a crap. So do this because it's the right thing to do. Do it because it's enjoyable, it makes work more interesting, it makes life more interesting, and it's actually compellingly the right thing for our industry, the right thing for us, and the right thing for the society we live in. So do it because it's the right thing to do. Thank you.